Hey, I'm Sarah Gonzalez. Welcome to the news and why it matters. Stu, what was the top story for you?
Somebody in a van, he sent a bunch of pipe bombs along to a bunch of people, and we apparently now know his name, which I don't think there's any real point in sharing, but there's a bunch of breaking developments on that.
Hey, Stu, was it from a super sane state?
Yeah, it's always the sanest state of Florida.
Okay.
All right, Jason.
It was going to be about a national publication writing about the assassination of the president, and then the van happened. So I'm going to side with Stu. It's the van.
Okay, Andrew.
I'm going to talk about a ruling from the European Court of Human Rights that affects freedom of speech. So keeping our eyes on friends in Europe.
Yes, all right, great. All right, Stu, start it off with the updates from what we know as of this taping.
Yeah, as of this broadcast, we have a situation where they believe they found the person. It seems they made an arrest in the case of the pipe bombs. And it seems to be someone who's super duper likes Donald Trump, like to a point of like Donald Trump can't even like himself this much. I know, I'm testing science, but here's do you have the picture of the van? This is one of the overheads of the van. You can't quite see everything on this. There's been some more high-res pics released since, and you can see on the back driver's side window you can relatively make out Donald Trump in the presidential seal. And, spoiler alert, they're all just like super pro Donald Trump things, along with very pro soccer. He was a very pro soccer guy. So of course, I think we should ban soccer and vans.
Yes.
I think we should ban bumper stickers. Look at that.
Yes, I think that's anyone with that many bumper stickers obviously is nuts.
I want to know what's inside the van. I'm curious as to what he's got in there.
Oh, there's definitely a bunch of bodies in that thing.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I mean, look, this is
Actually, he's not very good at the bombs. So
Yeah.
he's probably not so good at killing.
He also apparently misspelled Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yes.
So I was reading that and I was like, this is not a mastermind running a false flag operation. This is an idiot.
No.
He obviously did not care at all with hiding. I think a lot of times in attacks, and especially I've studied assassinations in the past, a lot of times they're not even concerned with hiding or not getting caught. They want to get caught. And this guy fits the profile for me. I mean, he knew, like I've said before, that it's almost virtually impossible in this day and age to pull off an attack like this, like mailing or either, at one point a camera is going to show you walking into a post office or handing off a package to a courier. It's virtually impossible to get away with this.
So his brilliant plan to frame Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
It was foiled.
I can't believe that. But her name, Debbie Wasserman Schultz aside, he is, super, obviously completely insane. He was on the radar though of authorities before this. Apparently, reportedly, they already had like taps on his, I don't know, you'd probably know the term of it, but it's where they're basically like holding a ongoing collection of information on him. Yeah. And again, if you're gonna
for making threats to federal judges, by the way, that's why he was already on the list,
which is a pretty big development. And you're right, you're not trying to hide. I guess everyone around town knew this guy. So, like, the idea that it's someone who is faking, I mean, he is directly out of central casting for Trump-supporting bomb maker.
So this is either over-the-top false flag, or I think probably really just a nut job.
Yeah, just a nut job on the Trump side. Because, I mean, he was also known around town. Obviously, when you have that van.
Turns out he's just like a really dedicated Jill Stein proponent. He's just like I'm going to go deep undercover for 3 years. I'm going to hang out with Steve Bannon.
And I think this brings up, there's a couple things that I think is interesting. Number one, the reaction to it will not be the same reaction that happened with the Bernie Sanders supporter who was shooting up the baseball field. We at the time made a very, at times it's hard to take the position because it's so easy to be able to say, well, Bernie Sanders is a really bad, influence on people and he's ginning people up to go do these things. It's not true. Bernie Sanders is a would be a terrible president, and is a terrible senator. He is not at all responsible for the lunatic volunteer who went and shot people at the baseball field. The same situation is here. There's a lot of stuff that Trump does that I don't like at all, but that does not make him responsible for this. But I do think you will see the media draw those lines a lot more clearly.
We already have.
And what's kind of bothered me throughout this process is that the kind of everyone in the media is getting into this defensive stance of just hating whatever team they're not on, which I think is a lot of the underlying problem of why we're experiencing this. We're in a society right now where it's not like you're in error, you're in sin, and you have to be stopped. And so people that are kind of on the edge of that mental health spectrum are going crazy. And the best way to combat that is to remember that, folks at Fox, folks at CNN, they still love their kids, they're still Americans, they still care about the country. and hopefully kind of tamper this down a little bit.
Only a terrorist would say that. Only a terrorist.
The 12 people that got fake bombs sent to their house, I really hope they have a good weekend. That's got to be jarring. Even if it's fake. Like, regardless of how you feel about Cory Booker or anybody else, their staffs too. They're terrified. These are terrible things. And there's a lot of good folks across the political spectrum that are all working and trying to come up with solutions to this. And so I just hope that the media is able to stop that impulse to just, I hate the other team so much, because it's feeding into this.
It's populism. It really is. Like, I've been looking into this a lot for another project, but I mean, this right here is the danger of populism. And it's both sides, whether it's on the right or the left, and we've already seen it. And plus with the what's the guy's name that you were just talking about that shot up the
I don't know,
the softball game.
I don't want to know.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah.
But anyway, that guy. It's again, those are the dangers of populism. Like, he was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I'm not blaming Bernie Sanders for this. We likewise should not blame Donald Trump for this. But when politics is running on the line on the avenues of populism, you don't see like policies as like your savior, like ideas. Those are not. People take the place of ideas and policy, and that is one of the big differences where populism differs from like being a idea or a policy or value based system. We put our faith and trust in like individuals, and when that happens, you'll do anything to defend them. Anything. You'll send pipe bombs to people's houses. You'll shoot up baseball games to do that. Very, very dangerous. I also want to point out that another name, like, we'll hear this guy's name nonstop for who knows how long now. Well, probably up until the midterms. Cesar. Yeah, I don't even think we need to know.
Yeah, no, let's not.
Anyway, but another name that we won't hear, and I just looked up his name, but I won't say it. But was the guy that sent ricin letters? This happened this month. It wasn't a couple years ago. It was just a couple weeks ago.
It is incredible.
And this week, he was just indicted by the DOJ. Yesterday.
Right, but can you?
Did anybody hear that? Was that in the media?
That's what I was going to say. But point out who he sent those to.
Yes, he sent them to Trump, Mattis,
Pence, right?
I don't know if it was Pence. I know Mattis.
Chris Wray,
a Navy admiral, an Air Force head, administration.
And Ivanka got a letter like this relatively recently as well. I mean,
you're right. Like, I was out of the country, so I literally missed all of what you just said. That was something like just looking at just my cursory scanning of media that did not pop up in my feed.
But you would not have missed this if you were out of the country, right? Yeah. Like, you would have caught this because I mean, look, and I understand it. Look, CNN in particular was actually one of the targets of this, so I can understand them seeing a high amount of value. But I mean, I think it is much more partisan based than that, and that's an issue that we've talked about this before. CNN, most of the media, and I would say on the left and the right, are completely obsessed with Trump as a individual, as a personality, and it drives way too much of the coverage. I think it's the one last part of this that I think is interesting when it comes to the case or what this actually is the idea is this a person who is trying to kill a bunch of people and is very bad at it, right? Like, he made 12 bombs and none of them exploded.
He's not only evil, he's incompetent.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's like, is it that he's a person who wants to attempt murder and is terrible at attempting murder? That is a profile of a person, right? Like, the shoe bomber was kind of like this, the underwear bomber. Remember these stories?
I hope they put them all in the same federal detention facility. So it's like they call it the loser wing.
You wouldn't even have to have doors or windows, no bars.
Like, here, take as many sheets as you want, moron.
Every day, like, their alarm clock is just wah wah. So it could be that, and that is, both of these are very bad. But like, the person who's trying to murder and fails. It will be interesting to see the distinction between that and the person who is not trying to murder and trying to scare. Both of those are crimes. It doesn't matter as far as, I mean, they may be different charges, but it is going to be interesting to see, I think, that from a profile perspective. Is this a person who's just trying to terrify people before an election and trying to scare them? We saw some of this from the New York Times reporting that came out today. Can we look at a couple of these clips? This is from a Times article talking about the profile and of these bombs in particular. Here's what they said. They said, none of the devices harmed anyone, and it was not immediately clear whether any of them could have. One law enforcement official said investigators were examining the possibility that they were hoax devices that were constructed to look like bombs but would not have exploded.
So this was paragraph number 1.
Well, this one was relatively towards the top. However, they didn't go into detail until I think it was paragraph 34, which is what you see here, this next one. Some bomb technicians who studied photos of the device that circulated on social media suggested that bombs sent to CNN had hallmarks of fake explosives, the kind more typically depicted on television and in movies, rather than devices capable of detonating. And then goes on to say a digital clock was taped to the middle of the pipe, a feature that experts say is typically shown on fictional bombs in an attempt to ratchet up dramatic tension, but unnecessary in real life. In fact, bomb makers generally avoid attaching visible clocks to their devices to keep from tipping off their targets about when bombs are set to explode.
So that last sentence, the reverse of which is because they want to tip off the people so that they see it and then cause the hubbub. And that's also why you send it to a news outlet. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you want the most amount of exposure on it, you send it to a news outlet and you make this very visible Acme, Warner Brothers, Saturday morning cartoon bomb.
Right, and that does not mean that he didn't, like we don't know. I think it's an interesting point to see that distinction, but we see people all the time, murderers who are outward and don't care if you find out who they are. I mean, with the one in South Carolina, the shooter there was very he left notes. He said, "This is why I'm doing it. No one will stand up because I think he didn't like black and white people getting married or something like that." And he said, "I'm going to go out and I'm going to shoot people up because of that." So it could very well be this type of case, and thankfully, if it was, he was just really awful at whatever he was doing. I mean, it's a bizarre thing, but if the outcome of this is we have a nut job who is off the streets and no one is hurt, there are worse outcomes, and hopefully that's where this thing ends.
I want to move on to free speech.
Sure. So over in Europe, the European Union is this kind of complex body, but there are supererogatory bodies in the judiciary above the individual nation states there. So recently there was a woman in Austria who was hosting a seminar where she was basically, kind of anti-Islam and said that the Prophet Muhammad is a pedophile. Now she said this because in the Hadith, which is not the Quran, it's the body of literature that kind of surrounds it, it says that Muhammad had married a 6-year-old. And so she had this, he's a pedophile, why should you, admire a 6-year-old, admire a pedophile? This was taken as a defamation lawsuit by the European Court of Human Rights. And what they ultimately ruled was that she was defaming the Prophet Muhammad and could not say this, so they fined her about 500 euros. Now they have said in the past that it's fair game to go after religion, but in her case they said that she was clearly going after a religion in order to rile them up and did not have the facts correct and therefore was an error. So they haven't quite gone so far as to say you can't pick on other religions, but they have kind of tipped their hand saying that they don't want you to actually cause intolerance to occur. And the problems with this I think are fairly myriad. One, it basically means that from what I can tell, the European Court of Human Rights is now going to have to weigh in on theology. Because if I'm over in Austria and I say like, you know what, I think Anabaptists are full of it, and because they're reasoning on this blah, 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 they kind of have to step in and correct when I'm wrong, and that seems like a very odd position for a court to be.
Can atheists just not speak at all? Like if you're an atheist, because you're obviously what you're going to say is all this is baloney anyway, is instantly they get hit with a lawsuit?
Yeah. They could be. I frankly doubt it because I think that the technocrats in the EU are probably going to be much more prone towards attacks on Christianity than it is on Islam. And I'm not like, it's not so much that I want to defame Islam or anything like that. I read into this literature and it's an interesting topic where you can get into the background and it's like, well, he might have married someone for socioeconomic reasons. It might not even been a sexual thing. It might have been to there's all sorts of things going on. So it's a fair conversation to have. But my concern is that they're in effect putting these boundaries on free speech. And you see this in Britain as well, which like in Britain, if you burn a Quran, you go to jail and that kind of thing. And to me, the reason this matters is that actual freedom of speech is very rare in human history. It's very rare. And in the United States, we've developed the system where you get to be a jerk. That's a fundamental American right, is you can be a jerk. And everyone's like, don't say that, you moron. But you do have that right to do it, and that's something that's getting chipped away at over in Europe.
Yeah, I think here too. I mean, you see the polls of young people in particular who think hate speech is not allowed by the Constitution. Yeah. And again, like hate speech, we all just really don't want hate speech to be around, but it is available for people to partake in, and they should be. I get the craziest example of this is they banned all Nazi stuff in Germany afterwards. The most understandable point of like, right, exactly.
Get that.
The most understandable, I think, possible example of saying you can't talk about a certain topic in human history, right? Like the Nazis, no longer can you promote the Nazi party in our country. We got a lot of that. It didn't work out well. Go away. Totally understandable, but still, I mean, I just don't think that that is the right way for humanity to operate. When a government can say anything is bad, when, even though we all 100% agree that Nazi propaganda is a horrible, horrible thing, to ban it, you know, you're encouraging people to try to find it in other ways. It doesn't, it feels like, you know, they're going to have arguments among themselves about how we're being downtrodden. We can't even say what we want to believe or what we believe. It's just, it's not the right way. You know, more speech, not less, has been, I think, a great foundation here. It's worked out pretty well. Had a pretty successful run.
I'm disturbed by these polls you mentioned in the United States of younger people thinking, you know, freedom of speech is overrated. And I've had a couple of friends in New York that have kind of alluded to that, which I was very surprised by. The thing I find very surprising is, particularly in the United States right now, with younger people who are liberal, I'm like, well, do you want Donald Trump to be in charge of like what is permissible? That seems like a terrible idea. Right now, this guy that you loathe with the hatred of a thousand suns is the head of the government. Maybe we shouldn't give the government that much power. Maybe we should retain that as the people.
Yes. They also want to everyone give him their guns, which is like, don't trust him and you think he's a fascist.
Right. Why would you?
Give him all your stuff. That's going to work out great. All right, back in a minute.
I feel like they've thought that one through all the way.
Yeah. There's this weird, like,
all right, so at the same time as we have this crazy Trump pipe bomber, we've got the New York Times publishing Trump assassination porn. Jason.
This is insane. So literally, exactly how you set it up. The same day these bombs are starting to show up in the mail, the New York Times is publishing this. It wasn't even, was it an op-ed or was it an actual full-on article?
It was a collection of like fiction writers,
yeah.
Right?
Which is crazy to me because so basically they were given the assignment of, let's just say the Mueller investigation is concluded, and you know, we've got all the information, you know, on what happened with Russia. So they gave all these 5 authors, they like do a little short story on what, you know, what happened. Every single one of them wrote the story as Trump was guilty. Like he was, you know, caught colluding with Russia, and what were the next steps that happened after that. They went as far as like him signing off on the 25th Amendment, staying in power, you know, with Mike Pence basically running the show, stuff like that, getting impeached. But the craziest one was a Russian spy coming over to the United States and attempting to assassinate the president. But at the last second, his gun like jams, you know, misfires, and the Secret Service runs over. You think that Secret Service is going to tackle him, but instead, Secret Service pulls out his weapon, hands it to the Russian spy, and he shoots the president. I mean, just insane. So for one, it's like, and again, like I think it was yesterday we had like 200 journalists all sign this like collective letter saying, look, the president's attacks on us, calling us fake news or inciting. Well, you are writing you're publishing fictional stories that depict violence on the president. Like, how do you, like, it's the most self-serving, ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. And I don't, it's a perfect metaphor for everything that's wrong with or not metaphor, but example of what is wrong with the media right now. Like, you have already made up your mind. You already know the outcome that you want to happen, and that's that he's guilty and he colluded with Russia. But even though you can't find that, which that's supposed to be your job, especially the New York Times, people like New York Times, Washington Post, it's your job to be the investigators, to go out and get the information that is not being told you. But in the absence of that, they're just writing fiction, literally writing fiction to go along with their narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I have a wide berth for creativity. You know, if people want to be fiction, if they want to write a story like that, I mean, they should be allowed to. As we were just saying, like very few limits, if any. I'm pretty much a free speech absolutist on these things. They should be able to write these things. I don't think you're certainly not able to maintain the moral high ground criticizing the other side for violent rhetoric when it's the hypocrisy that's really bothersome there, because we constantly are lectured by the New York Times and other sources about how this violent rhetoric is going to lead to really terrible things. Do I think anyone is going to go try to shoot the president because of a stupid fictional article in the New York Times? I don't. And it's, you know, even if someone did, it would not be the New York Times' responsibility. People are responsible for their own individual actions.
And now I feel is a good time to point out there are crazy people on all sides of the political spectrum.
Totally.
There are crazy people everywhere.
I mean, like, I could barely go into a restaurant and not run into someone who I think is about to murder me. I mean, pretty much everyone I think is insane.
What restaurants are you going to?
A lot of fast food stuff. I mean, this is why you avoid them. But yeah, I mean, like, look, there's crazy people everywhere. There's incompetent people everywhere. Like, there's people that you don't like. I mean, there's tons of people on the right that I would not want to hang out with, right? I mean, starting with this table. But you know, it's true. It's everywhere, right? Like, and it's just it's like we used to say with income inequality. Like I never would say to Barack Obama, "Hey, that yacht you just bought is a really terrible thing. You don't deserve it." It's his money. He can buy whatever he wants. But don't buy the gigantic yacht and preach to me about income inequality. You don't get both of those things. You either live in squalor and you can tell me those stories all day, or you go and you buy your yacht and you zip it about that. At least you have no credibility on that argument.
Donald Trump's not a gentleman. He's not a gentleman.
Not.
But if you're a gentleman, you need to retain that level of dignitas and respect. And
gentlemen say dignitas. That's one of the words they say.
A gentleman told me that in a seedy bathroom I was in last night at a dive bar. I think with particularly these large mainstream media outlets, if they want to adopt the position of, you know, I think rightly that we're becoming hyper partisan and we're becoming dominated by anger and hatred, then you can be a part of the process to help that. And that involves a lot of the time being better than the people that are yelling and trying to be staid. And I recommend anybody that's really worked up to read some Seneca and take a deep breath. And the New York Times should do that.
Last word.
I'm just amazed. The media now wants to get butthurt over being called fake, when over the past 8 years, you were extremely persecuted by the Obama administration. Don't act like this is an issue now, when for the past 8 years, it has been tons worse. He actually weaponized the DOJ and the FBI to look into their emails, to have people followed, surveillance, nonstop. Why is this like suddenly an issue now, just because they called you fake?
Yeah. All right, back in a minute.
That was way more than one word.
It was.
You just kept going. Yeah. It's like, I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but like 6.
If you have not gotten your tickets yet, Glenn and Stu, you're going with him, right?
I am.
You guys are going on the Addicted to Outrage tour.
We are. Starts next week.
What can people expect?
Well, there's the election only a few days away, so you're going to be watching all the craziness in the media about the election, and then we get to go make fun of it, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Don't forget to vote. That would be a really big.
Yeah, you should probably not. You should probably go to the tour and vote.
No, I meant you.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you forget to vote.
Well, I mean, if you're going to choose voting or going to the tour, glennbeck.com/tour.
Oh, well, there goes America. That's not what we need to be telling them. All right, we'll see you guys in overtime.
Where are you guys going?